The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.
Dear God, I wonder, can you save me?
Johnny Curry and his twin brother Leonard were born in 1959 and grew up in a predominantly African-American, lower-middle-class neighborhood on Detroit's east side, just 7 miles from downtown. The Currys' environment shaped them into key figures in Detroit's underworld during the 1980s, with Johnny emerging as the quieter, more calculated leader, while Leonard, or Leo, was the flashier and more extroverted sibling. Their younger brother, Rudell, nicknamed Boo, rounded out the family dynamic. Known respectively as Little Man and Big Man, Johnny and Leo entered the drug trade in the late 1970s, starting with marijuana sales. The seed money for their operation reportedly came from their father, Samuel "Sammy" Mac Curry, in 1978. The Curry brothers quickly escalated their operation, transitioning from marijuana to heroin, and later dominating Detroit's east side with powdered cocaine and crack in the 1980s. The Currys established a network of 24 dope houses offering a menu of marijuana, heroin, cocaine, and crack to their clientele. Their operation was organized and efficient, with Allen Hill Sr.'s Marathon Station Auto Garage at 10901 East Warren in Detroit serving as a hub for cash storage. One of the brothers would routinely visit the garage to collect the earnings, ensuring the flow of money remained steady and secure. The Currys' cocaine operation was fueled by connections to two key suppliers, Sam "Doc" Curry, a relative, and Art Derrick, a prominent Detroit figure with a reputation for high-flying drug smuggling. Derrick, who owned a fleet of 4 planes, 2 of which he reportedly purchased from the Rolling Stones, was instrumental in transporting cocaine from Miami. At the height of his operations, Derrick's daily profits soared to $100,000. He lived a lavish lifestyle reflected in his palatial Detroit home, complete with a marble-floored basement and a pool adorned with his initials. The Curry success translated into a lifestyle of conspicuous wealth. Both Johnny and Leo drove matching burgundy-colored Ford Broncos, fitted with luxurious Eddie Bauer leather interiors, symbolizing their twin dynamic and affluence. Even their younger brother Rudell joined in, driving a similarly styled blue Ford Bronco. Johnny, ever the reserved leader, also had a customized Berlina, further showcasing his taste for exclusivity. On sunny days, the Currys and their crew would gather at Belle Isle Park, a popular spot on the Detroit River. These outings were not just leisure, but also a public display of their dominance and unity, a flex of their power and success within Detroit's social and criminal circles. The Currys embodied the intersection of style, affluence, and the grit of the Detroit drug trade in the 1980s, leaving an indelible mark on the city's underworld. The Curry twins weren't just drug dealers, they were also fixtures of Detroit nightlife. They turned venues like Royal Skateland into their personal playgrounds, throwing late-night parties that drew crowds and attention. For a more mature scene, they gravitated toward the Lady nightclub, and for a wilder vibe, they hit up Stokes, a hotspot featuring strippers and topless waitresses. These establishments became extensions of their empire, places where power and influence were on full display. Johnny Curry's personal life added another layer of intrigue to his story. He dated and later married Kathy Germaine Volson, the niece of then Detroit Mayor Coleman A. Young. This connection gave Johnny a proximity to power few in the game could claim. Kathy's father, Willie Clyde Volson Jr., was no stranger to the underworld, having built his own legacy as a drug kingpin in the 1970s and 80s. After a stint in illegal gambling, Volson shifted to heroin and later cocaine, cementing the Volson name in Detroit's criminal history. Before her relationship with Johnny, Kathy had been romantically linked to Detroit Pistons star Vinnie the Microwave Johnson, a connection that highlighted her ties to both sports and street life. When Kathy became pregnant with Johnny's child, the baby shower was held at the Manoogian Mansion, the official residence of Mayor Young. This event symbolized the intersection of Detroit's political elite and its criminal underbelly, with Johnny Curry firmly at the center of it all. During Coleman A. Young's historic tenure as Detroit's first African-American mayor, he wielded immense political influence, and his niece Kathy Volson leveraged her familial ties to her uncle to navigate the city's power structures. Kathy reportedly used this connection to access sensitive police information about investigations involving her and the Curry organization, a significant advantage in a high-stakes game. Why 1984, the Curry brothers were under federal scrutiny. The FBI and Detroit police launched a full-scale investigation into their operations, culminating in federal agents covertly breaking into Johnny Curry's residence to plant listening devices. These tactics underscored the growing pressure on the Curry empire, Amid this, Rudell "Boo" Curry formed a close bond with Richard "White Boy" Rick Wershay, a local teenager from their East Side Detroit neighborhood. The two often cruised the streets in Rudell's blue Ford Bronco, picking up girls and frequenting the Curry brothers' legendary parties at Royal Skateland. Unbeknownst to the Currys, 14-year-old Wershay had been recruited as an informant by the FBI. His intimate access to the Curry circle made him a valuable asset in the federal investigation, providing insights into their operations. Wersh's role would later become one of Detroit's most infamous tales of betrayal, highlighting the volatile mix of youth, crime, and federal intervention in the city's turbulent drug era. Johnny Curry's marriage to Kathy Volson in 1985 further solidified his ties to Detroit's political elite. Kathy's status as the niece of Mayor Coleman A. Young came with perks, including a Detroit Police Department security detail assigned to her, led by Sergeant James Harris. This connection added an air of untouchability to Johnny and his organization, allowing him to operate with a sense of invulnerability in the city's underworld. Johnny's social status wasn't confined to Detroit. He often rubbed shoulders with high-profile figures, sometimes bringing Richard "White Boy" Rick Wershay along for the ride. Wershay, despite being just a teenager, became a frequent companion in Johnny's glamorous lifestyle. Johnny took Wershay to watch Detroit Tigers games and even brought him along to marquee events like the legendary World Middleweight Boxing Championship bout between marvelous Marvin Hagler and Detroit's own Thomas the Hitman Hearns. The fight, held on April 15, 1985 in Las Vegas, was an iconic moment in sports history, and Wersh's inclusion in the Curry's entourage symbolized the teenagers' deep entrenchment in their circle. The drive-by shooting on April 29th that claimed the life of 13-year-old Damian Lucas remains one of the darkest chapters in the Curry organization's history. The tragic event underscored the violent and often reckless nature of Detroit's drug underworld during the 1980s. Damian Lucas, an orphan living with his uncle Leon Lucas in northwest Detroit, was fatally struck in the chest while watching television with his younger brother Frankie. The shooting was not intended for Damian, but rather as a message to Leon Lucas, a heroin dealer and associate of the Curry brothers. Leon had reportedly failed to secure tickets for the Curry's Las Vegas trip to the Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns fight, exacerbating tensions already high due to a debt owed for cash and heroin seized during a prior police raid. According to the FBI, Leo Curry ordered the hit, directing Wyman Jenkins to orchestrate the attack. Sidney Wack Goodwin and Walter Waldo Owens were enlisted as gunmen and provided with MAC-10 and MAC-11 machine pistols. Kevin Weasel Colbert served as the getaway driver. The assailants targeted two locations that night: Robert Walton's home, where a parked car was riddled with bullets, and Leon Lucas's residence, where at least 10 shots were fired into the house, killing Damian. Leon Lucas later claimed in an interview that Leo Curry and Wyman Jenkins had explicitly threatened him on the morning of the shooting, warning of the drive-by. Despite this, a man unrelated to the Curry organization, Lakeis Davis, was initially charged with Damian's murder. However, FBI agent Herman Groman, who was also one of Richard "White Boy" Rick Wersh's handlers, presented wiretap evidence proving Davis's innocence. The charges against Davis were subsequently dropped. The murder of Damian Lucas cast a spotlight on the brutality of Detroit's drug trade and the Curry organization's willingness to resort to violence to settle disputes. The senseless killing of a young boy marked a turning point in public and law enforcement scrutiny of the Currys, contributing to their eventual downfall. The aftermath of 13-year-old Damian Lucas's tragic killing in April 1985 demonstrated the lengths to which the Curry organization would go to maintain its grip on Detroit's drug trade while attempting to manage internal fallout. In the wake of the killing, Johnny Curry reportedly convened a meeting in his home's basement. There, he offered payments to any associates willing to stay silent if questioned by law enforcement, a move indicative of the organization's deep roots in fear and loyalty. FBI agent Herman Groman revealed that Johnny reached out to Sergeant James Harris, a member of his wife Kathy Volson's police security detail, and Commander Gilbert Roland "Gil" Hill, head of the Detroit Police Department's Homicide Division, the morning after the drive-by. The implications of these calls hinted at the Currys' ability to wield influence within the city's law enforcement circles. Later that year, the violence escalated. On September 19th, Lamont "Bummy Lou" Davis, a Curry associate, committed an act of brutal retribution against an individual who had failed to pay a drug debt to the organization. Davis not only beat the man, but set him on fire, exemplifying the ruthlessness with which the Currys dealt with disloyalty or non-compliance. That same day, Lee Potts, a known enforcer for the Currys, reportedly acted on Johnny Curry's orders to kill Eric Dunston, a rival in a turf dispute, further cementing the organization's reputation for lethal efficiency. By 1987, the Curry's cocaine empire was estimated to have generated approximately $200 million. This staggering figure reflected the vast scope of their operation, which included not just local distribution, but also connections to major suppliers and an infrastructure capable of maintaining dominance over Detroit's east side. However, such prominence also attracted relentless federal attention, setting the stage for their eventual undoing. The massive federal takedown of the Curry organization on April 2, 1987, marked the beginning of the end for one of Detroit's most notorious drug empires. The indictment was the culmination of a years-long investigation spearheaded by the FBI, Detroit Police Department, and IRS. Johnny Curry, his father Samuel "Sammy Mac" Curry, younger brother Rudell "Boo" Curry, Wyman Jenkins, Lamont Davis, and Allen Hill Sr. faced charges that included operating a continuing criminal enterprise, a serious federal offense reserved for large-scale organized criminal operations. That same day, Johnny, Sam, Rudell, and Hill were formally charged in federal court. However, Leo Curry, Jenkins, and Davis managed to evade authorities and remained at large for some time, adding tension to an already high-profile case. The indictment named a total of 20 members of the Curry organization, with Kathy Volson Curry, Johnny's wife and niece of Detroit Mayor Coleman Young, her father Willie Volson, and several other associates, including Ruth Curry, Patricia Curry, Cassandra Curry, Carlene Knight, Roy Covington, and Anthony Zero Johnson, as unindicted co-conspirators. While they were not formally charged, their connections to the operation underscored the vast network supporting the Curry drug empire. Facing overwhelming evidence, including wiretaps and testimonies, Johnny and Leo Curry, represented by attorney Steve Fishman, chose to accept a plea deal. On September 8, 1987, they pleaded guilty to charges of operating a continuing criminal enterprise and tax evasion, significantly reducing their potential prison time. Eventually, all 18 remaining defendants also entered guilty pleas, effectively dismantling the Curry organization's operations. The guilty pleas not only brought an end to the Curry's reign, but also shed light on the deep systemic ties their empire had to local politics, law enforcement, and the community. This case became a stark reminder of the intertwined nature of crime, power, and influence in Detroit during the height of the crack epidemic. On January 13th, U.S. District Court Judge Richard Heinrich handed down sentences for the Curry brothers, marking the final chapter in the federal case against their empire. Johnny and Leo Curry were each sentenced to 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole and fined $250,000. Their younger brother, Rudell "Boo" Curry, who pleaded guilty to narcotics conspiracy charges, received a lighter sentence of 7.5 years on February 18th. Another key player, Wyman Jenkins, was eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison. In a shocking turn of events, Kathy Volson Curry, Johnny's wife and niece of Detroit Mayor Coleman Young, testified in 1992 that Commander Gilbert "Gil" Hill had tipped off Johnny about an FBI wiretap on his phone. Johnny later admitted to FBI agents that he and Kathy had personally delivered a $10,000 bribe to Hill at police headquarters to misdirect the investigation into Damian Lucas's murder away from the Curry organization. The payment allegedly took place in Hill's office, facilitated by Sergeant James Harris, who chauffeured the Currys to the meeting. Hill's involvement in the case further tainted his reputation, though his public persona remained largely intact. Known to many as Inspector Todd from his appearances in the Beverly Hills Cop film trilogy, Hill leveraged his celebrity status into a political career, becoming president of Detroit City Council in 1989. He passed away in February 2016, leaving behind a legacy of both civic service and scandal. Johnny and Leo Curry served 11 years of their sentences at a federal prison in Texarkana, Texas. They were released in 1999, bringing an end to their time behind bars. By the time they re-entered society, the drug game in Detroit had drastically shifted, and their once formidable empire had long since crumbled under the weight of federal scrutiny and changing times. The Curry case remains a landmark in Detroit's history, illustrating the deep intersections of organized crime, politics, and law enforcement during the turbulent 1980s. Richard Earl Carter, born on July 31st, 1959, grew up in the heart of post-industrial Detroit, right around the time the city started crumbling under the weight of its own struggles. The auto industry was dying, white folks were fleeing to the suburbs, and the hood was left to fend for itself. Carter lived near Detroit City Airport, on the same block as future boxing champ Thomas the Hitman Hearns. He was just a kid when the city exploded during the 5-day riot of 1967, a wild, chaotic moment that went down right before his 8th birthday. That riot wasn't just noise. It was the kind of event that shaped the streets Carter came up on. As a teen, Carter got caught up in the hustle early, joining a car theft ring and stacking paper. He copped a BMW off his licks and by 1977 leveled up to a powder blue Mercedes-Benz. But the fast life comes with consequences, and that same year he caught a charge for receiving stolen goods. That landed him in the system for a minute, but it didn't break him, just set the stage for his next move. By 1982, Carter was out and looking for his next come-up. That's when he slid into the boxing world, starting small as a towel boy for his childhood homie, Thomas Hearns. Kronk Gym was the spot, the epicenter of Detroit's boxing scene, and Carter made sure to put himself in the mix. It wasn't long before he leveled up again, becoming Hearns' bodyguard and eventually managing the career of his younger brother, Greg Carter, who was trying to make a name for himself in the ring. Carter wasn't just some random dude hanging around the gym. He was rubbing shoulders with legends. Sugar Ray Leonard, Don King, you name it, Carter found a way to get close. The boxing game gave him a front row seat to the kind of power and money he'd been chasing since his teenage years. In true hustler fashion, he used the same street smarts that got him that Benz to navigate the politics and egos of the fight game. Not long after, Carter linked up with his lifelong homie, Demetrius Holloway, to make some serious moves. The two came up with a plan to take over the streets, founding a drug empire that would soon dominate Detroit. They saw an opportunity in the chaos left behind by Sylvester Seal Murray. By the early 80s, Murray, known as the S-Man in the streets, had the city on lock. He was the go-to supplier for heroin, coke, and weed, feeding heavyweight crews like YBI, Young Boys Incorporated, and Pony Down. But in December 1982, the game shifted. Murray caught a major conviction in a big narcotics sweep, and the leadership of YBI got snatched up too. 41 of their top players taken out in one hit. With the S-Man and YBI sidelined, the streets were hungry and the demand for product was sky high. Carter and Holloway saw their opening and moved fast. They stepped into the vacuum left by Murray and YBI, filling the void with a steady flow of product. It wasn't just about supply, it was about timing, connections, and understanding the game. Carter and Holloway played it smart, stepping into the role of Detroit's new kingpins and taking full advantage of the power shift in the city's underworld. By 1983, Carter had jumped into the heroin game heavy, and it didn't take long for him to make a name in Detroit's streets. By 1985, his rep was solid, and he was running with the city's elite, rubbing shoulders with crews like the Chambers brothers, the Davis family, what was left of YBI, and the Curry boys. But Carter and his partner Holloway weren't just about flexing. They were about power moves. To keep the narcotics flowing, they linked up with a young plug, 16-year-old Richard "White Boy" Rick Wershey. Wershey wasn't just some random kid slinging on the block. He had serious connections. Not only was he tied to product, but he was also dating Kathy Volson, the wife of Johnny Curry, and the niece of Detroit's mayor, Coleman Young. With Rick in their corner, Carter and Holloway had a pipeline to the best supply, and a layer of political insulation that most couldn't touch. But Carter knew it wasn't just about the product, it was about protection. To lock that down, he brought in Reginald Rockin' Reggie Brown and his crew of killers. Reggie and his brothers, Ezra Wizard Brown, Gregory Ghost Brown, and Terrence Boogaloo Brown, ran a murder-for-hire operation that was as cold as it gets. Carter made sure they were strapped with the best. Bulletproof vests, high-powered assault rifles, automatic pistols, and when the heat came down, top-notch lawyers to clean up the mess. With the Browns riding for him, Carter made sure no one could touch his operation, solidifying his spot as one of Detroit's most feared and respected kingpins. With the enforcement arm in place and his grip on Detroit tightened, Carter began expanding his reach, connecting the dots between the city and both coasts. His influence wasn't confined to Detroit anymore. He secured ties with key players in Miami and Los Angeles, setting up a coast-to-coast network that boosted his operations exponentially. Federal investigators eventually credited Carter's organization with being the first to fully dominate the I-75 corridor, transforming it into a key pipeline for transporting narcotics from Miami to Detroit. This wasn't just a local hustle anymore. It was a major part of a national drug trafficking network, running product from the hotbeds of Miami and LA straight into the Motor City. With those connections, Carter didn't just control the streets, he controlled the flow, cutting out middlemen and locking down the entire supply chain from coast to coast. Carter earned his infamous nickname at just 25 years old, when he became the first African-American of his generation in Detroit to roll up in a Maserati. But contrary to popular belief, his car of choice was still the sleek and powerful Mercedes-Benz. It was a playful rivalry with his longtime partner and close friend, Demetrius Holloway, that pushed Carter to step up his game. The two had already been known for their fleet of BMWs and Benzes, but Carter's decision to cross over to the Italian automaker was a direct jab at Holloway. Legend has it that Carter's arrival in his brand new Maserati at a popular Detroit nightclub was the spark that birthed the name. The streets whispered about how Carter's flashy entrance in the exotic ride became the stuff of legend, inspiring the nickname that stuck to him like a scar. Though Carter officially claimed a modest bungalow on Burwood Avenue as his residence, his wealth and power allowed him access to far more lavish digs. Rumors swirled of a riverfront condo with views of the Detroit River, a fortress-like flat near East Jefferson Avenue and Alta Road, said to be reinforced like a military bunker, housing cash, guns, and secrets. Carter lived like a king, his real estate and his car choices reflecting his untouchable status in the city's underworld. Carter had a knack for laundering his narcotics money through seemingly legitimate businesses, hair salons, barbershops, and car washes, each serving as a front for his illegal wealth. The car washes in particular proved invaluable. Not only did they generate a steady flow of cash to mask his earnings, but they also acted as a shield for large-scale transactions. It wasn't uncommon for vehicles to drive into the tunnel apparatus empty, only to emerge packed with cash or stashed with narcotics. By 1987, Carter had become the undisputed king of the East Side drug trade in Detroit. His influence didn't stop there. The best friends expanded their grip beyond the city to other key Michigan cities, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, and Port Huron, turning their reputation into a force known and feared across the state. Members of the organization were easy to spot, rolling through the streets in late-model Volvos and rocking their signature black jackets emblazoned with the Best Friends logo. Before hitting 30, Carter was a multimillionaire, his net worth exceeding $20 million. But his rise to power wasn't smooth or quiet. His organization became tied to over 100 homicides in Detroit, each death contributing to his ruthless reputation. Rumors swirled about Holloway's alleged affair with Carter's child's mother, Tracy Cowan, adding to the tension between the two. However, Carter's biggest rival wasn't Holloway, at least not in the same way. His fiercest enemy was his former childhood friend and business partner, Edward "Big Ed" Hansard. The two had once been tight, but as Carter's empire grew, so did his resentment towards Hansard. Their split would fuel a bitter and deadly rivalry that would stretch across Detroit's underworld, setting the stage for more violence and chaos. Big Ed Hansard started off his criminal journey as a small-time marijuana dealer, sourcing his product from childhood friends Carter and Holloway. However, as Hansard expanded his operations, he quickly became a major player in the Detroit drug trade, building his own reputation with law enforcement. The origin of the feud between Hansard and Carter remains murky, with differing accounts of how it all began. Some believed it was rooted in a debt owed by Big Ed to Carter, while others pointed to Hansard's aggressive expansion into territory already claimed by Carter. There were also whispers that Hansard had bypassed Carter as his exclusive supplier in favor of a more direct connection from California, further straining their relationship. Whatever the cause, by the summer of 1987, what had once been whispers of animosity grew into open hostility. The conflict, initially fueled by petty insults and rumors, Big Ed allegedly claiming his nickname came from Carter's mother, boiled over into public confrontations. The most infamous clash took place at Hansard's unisex hair salon, where both men came face to face, guns drawn. From there, the feud descended into shootouts, murder attempts, and a dangerous escalation that would define their rivalry and leave a deadly trail across Detroit's streets. Carter made 3 known attempts on Big Ed's life. One particularly violent encounter involved an exchange of automatic gunfire that left Hansard shot in the stomach. Wounded and hospitalized, he spent months recovering, but even while injured, Hansard refused to cooperate with police, vowing instead that he'd handle it himself. With law enforcement breathing down his neck, Big Ed eventually decided to lay low, temporarily relocating to Yazoo City, Mississippi, in an effort to escape the heat. Even from afar, Hansard's drug-running empire continued. In 1989, during a weapons arrest in Mississippi, Big Ed reportedly told the arresting officers, "I'm going to get Maserati Rick, and then I'm going to get you." It was a clear threat, one that underscored the simmering rivalry between the two and Hansard's determination to settle the score, no matter the cost. Not long after returning to Detroit, Hansard was said to have orchestrated a chilling drive-by aimed at Carter's mother's house. The intent was clear, targeting the home while she stood on the front porch holding Carter's 2-year-old son. Miraculously, neither the child nor Carter's mother were harmed, but the audacity of the attack sent shockwaves through the city. 2 months later, Hansard reportedly attempted another drive-by, this time aiming for the mother of Carter's child. However, Hansard had the wrong address, and instead he sprayed gunfire at the house belonging to the neighbor next door. On September 10, 1988, things escalated to a violent standoff. A shootout erupted outside one of Carter's car washes, leaving Carter wounded in the stomach while Hansard and an associate were hit in the arm. None of the participants, however, cooperated with police, and the violence only continued to spiral out of control. 2 days later, while Carter was still recovering from his injuries in room 307 of Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital, Lodrick, the hitman Parker, a known enforcer for Hansard, allegedly entered his hospital room. At 6:01 p.m., Carter was officially pronounced dead from gunshots to the face. Parker, who was reputed to be the third man involved in Carter and Hansard's final confrontation, was the one responsible for the execution-style killing. Hansard, however, had an alibi. He was in police custody on charges of unlawful possession of a firearm at the time of the shooting. He denied any involvement, instead telling investigators he'd once thrown a brick through the window of one of Carter's car washes. Despite Hansard's alibi, the connection between him and Parker, coupled with the long-standing feud, raised suspicions. Carter's murder became the first known shooting inside Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital in its 50-year history. The incident led to significant changes in hospital policy, tightening security measures and increasing visitor screening throughout the city. Just hours after his death, Carter was listed as a defense witness in the trial of another high-profile drug trafficker in Detroit, leaving his involvement in the city's underworld firmly etched in the annals of its criminal history. Carter was laid to rest in a custom-made $16,000 silver casket designed to resemble a Mercedes-Benz, complete with functioning lights and spinning wheels. His burial took place at Detroit's Elmwood Cemetery, a testament to his life of luxury and infamy. Tracy Cowan, Carter's longtime girlfriend, would later be convicted on drug-related charges and sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Meanwhile, Richard Whiteboy Rick Wershey had already been convicted on drug charges and sentenced to life in prison just 8 months prior to Carter's death. Reginald Rockin' Reggie Brown, another key figure in Carter's operation, was sentenced to life behind bars just 4 months after Wershey. On September 17, 1990, Carter's oldest brother Clyde and his girlfriend Patricia Scott were shot to death by an assailant with a 9mm handgun after exiting Clyde's pickup truck with their 1-year-old son. The child miraculously survived the attack. The following month, Demetrius Holloway, Carter's lifelong friend and business partner, was gunned down while shopping in his favorite clothing store in downtown Detroit. Lodrick Parker was tried and acquitted of both Carter and Holloway's murders, but the violence surrounding Carter's death continued to ripple through the streets of Detroit. This is the story of a seasoned hitman known by several ominous names: Boone, the Iceman, the Grim Reaper. In his prime, he was Detroit's most feared hitman, a figure of terror whose name alone could send chills down the spine of anyone in the city's underworld. Today, he's become something of a hot commodity in the world of street gang podcasts. For a man who claims responsibility for over 30 murders, his story remains tragically untold on the big screen or even in a Wikipedia page. He's reportedly been offered movie rights to his life story, but always turned them down, rejecting offers made for free, fearing he'd be conned out of his truth. The tales he tells of life on the streets and his time behind bars paint a brutal picture of a dark era in American history, one marked by violence, survival, and ruthless power plays. Whether his stories are embellished or not, the man bears the visible scars of his battles in the streets. Those scars themselves tell a tale, a testament to the battles he fought and survived in a demonic time that left lasting marks on his body and his soul. He claims to have been shot with an AK-47, a shotgun, and a pistol, stabbed, tortured, and left for dead more than once. Each scar etched into his skin tells a tale of relentless battles fought in the streets, where life was cheap and survival was never guaranteed. Yet he boasts with an eerie confidence that as long as his mind remains intact, no one can truly defeat him. His memories, raw and unfiltered, are etched in the haunting stories he tells. His war wounds are not just marks of battle, they're a testament to a life lived on the edge. In countless podcasts, he recounts the murders, each one delivered with chilling detachment, void of remorse. There's a dark humor that lingers in his voice, as though these were not just acts of violence but mere chapters in a larger, grim tale. For him, the world has long since abandoned any notion of innocence. This is the life and times of Nate Boone Craft, a man whose name strikes fear into the hearts of even hardened criminals. In Detroit, he became a living legend, a figure whose presence loomed over the underworld, a stark reminder of the savage history that defined a city consumed by violence and decay. His story, raw and unapologetic, remains one of the most terrifying yet elusive narratives of Detroit's dark past. Nate Craft was born on Detroit's East Side in 1957, in a tough neighborhood that molded him into one of the most feared figures the city would ever know. Growing up in a household where everyone worked long, grueling hours only to return home tired and defeated, young Nate decided early on that he wanted a different life. Watching that daily grind shaped his mentality. He wasn't about to spend his life being worked to the bone like the rest of his family. His aggression, he claimed, was born from being bullied in school. But unlike most kids who grow out of childhood scraps, Nate never saw fights as something you could just walk away from. For him, if you fought, it was all or nothing. Someone had to go. That mindset became a part of him, a code he lived by as he navigated the brutal streets of Detroit. The nickname Boone came from his childhood fascination with knives, particularly the Bowie-style blades. Craft would spend hours playing with them, sharpening them, and honing a skill that became more than a hobby. It became an identity. By the time he was a teenager, he wasn't just another kid trying to survive the streets. He was someone the streets had learned to fear. From a young age, Nate understood that the world wasn't going to give him anything, so he took what he wanted. He rejected the conventional path his family had followed, choosing instead a life that would lead him down a much darker road, a road paved with blood, violence, and the kind of notoriety that would echo long after his time. Boone wasn't about to waste time chasing chump change. He wanted fast money, and he wanted it young. By the time he was just 9 years old, he figured out the quickest way to stack cash in his neighborhood: heroin. He and his best friend Germ jumped into the game early, pushing product on the unforgiving streets of Detroit's East Side. Boone didn't just sell drugs, he branded them. He called his heroin "Due to Die," a name as raw and ruthless as the product itself. The name wasn't just for show either, it was a warning and a promise. The message was simple: if you did it, you'd die. That level of potency made his product infamous, and before long, Boone and Germ had a reputation as young dealers with the kind of product that could either make or break you. At just 9 years old, Nate Craft wasn't like the other kids in his neighborhood. While they were in bed by nightfall, young Boone was sneaking out of the house, hustling on Detroit's East Side. His main customers? Retired veterans who'd fallen on hard times and turned to the streets for their fix. Boone's Due to Die heroin wasn't just a product. It was a promise of potency that kept his clientele coming back, even at the risk of their lives. But even at that young age, there was something darker brewing beneath the surface. Boone's homicidal tendencies were already taking root. Threats weren't something he tolerated at all. For him, disrespect or intimidation wasn't just a challenge, it was a death sentence. His method was cold, calculated, and efficient. If you threatened Boone, you got a 3-count warning, 1 for the initial offense, 2 if you dared to repeat yourself, but you'd never hear 3. By then, it was too late. Boone didn't make empty threats, and he never left loose ends. His reactions weren't about proving a point. They were about survival and respect. Even as a child, he understood the brutal code of the streets: either command fear or become a victim. At just 10 years old, Nate Craft crossed a line that most people never even approach. He committed his first murder. The victim was his adult heroin supplier, a man Nate felt had crossed him with a threat. In Nate's world, threats were invitations to violence, and he didn't hesitate to accept. After the deed was done, Nate took matters into his own hands, literally. He buried the man's body in his backyard, thinking he could hide the evidence and make a fresh start. But burying a body isn't as simple as it looks in the movies, and Nate's inexperience showed. The shallow grave barely concealed the corpse, and before long, the smell of decomposition began to hang heavy in the air, stinking up the whole neighborhood. To Nate, this was less a failure and more a learning experience. He didn't just eliminate his supplier, he took the man's entire heroin stash, leveling up his operation overnight. For a 10-year-old kid, it was a bold and calculated move, one that demonstrated both his ruthlessness and his ambition. The cops eventually found the poorly buried body, but back in those days, a black man's murder in a struggling Detroit neighborhood didn't spark much of an investigation. Whether it was apathy, overburdened detectives, or outright racism, the case was quietly shelved, and Nate walked away without consequence. For him, it was a validation of his worldview. If you were smart, ruthless, and kept your mouth shut, you could get away with anything. By the time Nate was around 10 years old, the seeds of his infamous reputation had already begun to sprout. His temper was legendary, even within his own household. One incident nearly ended in tragedy when he caught his brother stealing his money. For Nate, theft wasn't just a petty offense. It was a violation of trust, something he couldn't tolerate. He pulled a gun, fully intending to end his brother's life right then and there. It was only their mother's intervention that stopped him, stepping in just as he was about to pull the trigger, but the streets wouldn't always offer someone to step in and stop him. Not long after, Nate's protective instincts turned fatal when someone messed with his sister. To him, family was sacred, and disrespecting them was a death sentence. Without hesitation, he slashed the man's throat, ending his life on the spot. It was another brutal chapter in Nate's young life, one that cemented his reputation as someone you didn't cross. Not in the streets, and definitely not when it came to his family. By now, Nate had already set his own personal code of conduct. He had no problem taking a life, but it wasn't always about the money. For him, there were two things that justified killing without a payday: disrespect and family. If either came into play, he wouldn't hesitate to handle it, free of charge. This wasn't business, it was personal, and in Nate's world, that meant blood. By the time Nate was barely in his pre-teens, he was already living a life most grown men in the streets could only dream of, or fear. While other kids his age were riding bikes and playing ball, Nate was driving around in a car he'd bought himself in sporting suits that made him look like a young hustler on the rise. The normal joys of childhood held no interest for him. His focus was strictly on survival, respect, and getting money. It wasn't long before the system got involved in his life. A judge, overwhelmed by the chaos in his household and his mother's struggle to manage so many kids, decided Nate needed a different environment. He was sent to a youth home, but Nate wasn't the type to thrive in structure or follow anyone else's rules. His aggressive nature clashed with authority at every turn. The foster care system became his next stop, but it was no better fit. Nate's violent tendencies got him labeled as a problem child wherever he went. He bounced from home to home, leaving a trail of fear and frustration in his wake. Eventually, he was kicked out altogether, deemed too much for the system to handle. At 16, Nate returned to Detroit, hoping to reconnect with his family, only to find himself utterly alone. Homeless and left to fend for himself, he got a front row seat to the harsh realities of Detroit's underbelly. The city had no mercy, and Nate quickly learned that neither could he. One incident stuck with him from this time. He witnessed a pimp assaulting a woman who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Stepping in without hesitation, Nate confronted the man. But when the pimp pulled a knife on him, it was the last mistake he ever made. Nate shot him dead, stuffing his body into a garbage bin like yesterday's trash. To Nate, it wasn't just survival, it was justice served in the rawest form. With no real direction and nothing tying him down, Nate decided to join the army. It was a choice born as much from desperation as ambition. Whatever training he received there, he kept to himself, refusing to share the details in later years. What's clear, though, is that the skills he picked up during his time in the military would later serve him well in his career as one of Detroit's deadliest hitmen. After leaving the army, Nate Craft's life took another sharp turn when a robbery investigation landed him in the hot seat. A gun, left in his car by his brother, was linked to the crime. Adding to the confusion, Nate and his brother bore an uncanny resemblance. Despite knowing the truth, Nate refused to snitch on his brother, a decision that came with a steep price: 4 years in prison on gun and robbery charges. Inside, Nate quickly made a name for himself. His cold, calculating demeanor and his willingness to resort to extreme violence earned him the chilling nickname, the Iceman. He exuded an air of calm that belied the storm of violence he was capable of unleashing. Guards and inmates alike came to fear him. Stories of Nate stabbing fellow prisoners and even corrections officers began to circulate, painting a picture of a man who thrived in chaos. Nate Craft, already a proficient hustler before his time behind bars, turned his prison sentence into an entrepreneurial playground. Inside, he sold drugs, knives, food, ran gambling tables, and even arranged for women to visit inmates, a rare and dangerous hustle. He had an uncanny ability to exploit every opportunity, cementing his position as a dominant figure in the prison's underground economy. By the time his sentence was up, prison had done nothing to rehabilitate him. If anything, it sharpened his skills and expanded his network. On the day of his release, Nate made sure his departure was as memorable as his stay. In a brazen act of defiance, he tore up his coat in front of the guards, revealing the $72,000 he had stitched into its lining, money he had made hustling on the inside. His taunt to the guards was a declaration of his resilience and resourcefulness. Nate walked out of those prison gates not as a changed man, but as a more polished version of the hustler and killer he'd always been. From that point on, Nate Kraft became a full-fledged contract killer, a man whose services were sought after by Detroit's most dangerous and desperate. The 80s in Detroit were pure madness. Crack turned the hood into a war zone with fast money, big egos, and enough firepower to rival an army. Boone was in the middle of it all, getting his bread the grimy way. Yeah, he was about the money, but he had his own twisted code. He wasn't out here taking out civilians. If you wasn't in the game, you wasn't on his list. That gave him a sick kind of respect, like the Hood's version of Dexter. Boone wasn't just some trigger-happy hitter, he was surgical with it. Over time, his name rang out heavy in the streets, and he started pulling in $50K and up for a job. And if you wanted to send a real message, Boone had add-ons, torture, chopping up bodies, even delivering pieces of the victim to whoever needed the reminder. But Boone wasn't sloppy. He'd spend days, sometimes weeks, studying his target, figuring out their every move. When he struck, it was lights out. No mistakes, no second chances. He was so reliable, even dirty cops came knocking when they needed somebody handled off the books. Boone always moved solo, no partners, no liabilities. He knew a partner today could be a snitch tomorrow. He played the long game, throwing off cops by leaving false clues that made it look like someone else did the dirt. And if he needed to make someone disappear, man, Boone didn't just dump bodies. He had ways, feeding folks to pigs or running them through a tree shredder. No body, no case. Boone swears off pork to this day, a twisted reminder of his past. Despite all the horrors he committed, that one rule stuck with him. Something about respect for the craft, maybe. He was careful, meticulous, and smart enough to never get caught. But in the streets of Detroit, people knew better. When they saw a large figure in a hoodie and glasses lurking around, they knew it wasn't just anybody. It was the Grim Reaper, and somebody's life was about to be snuffed out. On top of being a cold-blooded contract killer, Boone dabbled in loan sharking. And if you missed your payment, he wasn't the type to send reminders. He handled that himself. Violence was his guarantee. If the hitmen didn't strike fear enough, Boone would make sure they paid for it one way or another. He worked for the Detroit Mafia too, getting his hands dirty with their dirty work. If someone owed money and didn't pay, Boone was the one they sent to break them. He still talks about those days, laughing about the methods he used. Threatening to pin people's eyelids back so they couldn't close their eyes while he tortured them, classic Boone. He didn't just break bodies, he broke souls. Years later, he ran into one of his torture victims in prison, and that meeting wasn't exactly a reunion anyone wanted. For Boone, that was just another day in the life of the Grim Reaper. During all of this, Boone's name was becoming synonymous with death, and his expertise didn't go unnoticed by the men rising to power during the crack-fueled explosion of Dope City. These newcomers were carving out their own piece of Detroit, flexing muscle and vying for control of the streets. It was a dog-eat-dog world, and in a city where only the strong, or the ruthless, survived, Boone had proven he was both. One night, after stepping in to break up a near shootout between his friends and a rival crew, Boone was offered cash to become a bodyguard for Maserati Rick, Detroit's top kingpin at the time. Rick, who was already dominating the city's heroin trade, began supplying the Best Friends gang, who had their sights set on expanding into the booming coke game, pushing weight into Demetrius Holloway's territory. The Best Friends gang, known for their flashy gold chains, exotic cars, and those embroidered jackets with Best Friends emblazoned across the back, became Rick's muscle in this new venture. By the end of 1986, the Best Friends had grown from 25 members to 50, each one notorious in their own right, armed with reputation and firepower. Boone met the Browns, the notorious enforcers of the Best Friends, after they saw him in a tough man boxing contest. Boone claimed to have TKO'd Butterbean at one of these events, though it's hard to verify that online. Impressed by his skill, the Browns approached him after the fight, offering him a position. Boone accepted without hesitation, recognizing the opportunity for even more power and influence. From that point forward, Boone wasn't just a hitman. He became a key player, running with both Maserati Rick and the Best Friends. According to Boone, loyalty was never a factor when it came to his dealings. His only allegiance was to whoever paid him the most. Boone prided himself on instilling fear, especially in those who weren't hardened criminals. He often filled their heads with gruesome stories of what prison life could do to men, making them believe that if they ever found themselves caught, the only option was to shoot it out with the cops, because no snitch meant no evidence, and no evidence meant no one to testify against him. Boone also took on freelance jobs for extra cash, one of which was a contract reportedly worth $125,000 from Detroit City Council President Gail Hill. The target was Richard "White Boy" Rick Wershey, the teenage informant who threatened to expose corrupt cops in Detroit. Wershey had already become notorious for his role as a drug informant, and his exposure posed a risk to law enforcement officials who were involved in the city's dirty dealings. Boone recounts multiple attempts to eliminate Wershey, a failed drive-by, a sniper waiting for him outside the courthouse, and even a plan to have Boone infiltrate a prison unit where Wershey had been transferred, with plans to use rocket launchers if necessary. However, despite all the efforts, Wershey was sentenced to life without parole before any of Boone's missions could come to fruition. The man they called White Boy Rick would live on, a thorn in the side of Detroit's corrupted power structures, as Boone's reach just wasn't long enough. On the streets, the dope game was spiraling into chaos, with violence becoming the norm. In December of 1986, tragedy struck the Best Friends gang. Enforcer Ezra Brown was killed in a drive-by while with his brother Terrence, who miraculously survived a headshot. 7 days later, tragedy struck again. Gregory Brown, another brother, was shot and killed in a separate drive-by, walking home on the east side still wearing the tuxedo from Ezra's funeral. Demetrius Holloway was suspected to have ordered both of these hits, and in retaliation, Terrence Brown placed a hit on Meach. After Gregory's death, the Brown brothers, Reginald and Terrence, became more aggressive, setting their sights on taking full control of Detroit's east side. This newfound power meant more bloodshed, more hits, and more turf wars. Reginald, known as Rockin' Reggie, became the group's chief enforcer, a man Boone describes as even more unhinged than himself. Reggie, high on whatever he could get his hands on, would often have Boone drive him around the west side for random drive-bys, chasing chaos wherever they went. As for Maserati Rick, he'd made a lot of enemies over the years. His Best Friends gang was rumored to be linked to over 100 murders by then, their reputation as one of the most violent crews in Detroit well established. His biggest rival was Big Ed Hansard, another kingpin on the east side, and a former ally turned enemy. The tension between them is said to have started with a petty insult. Big Ed supposedly claimed his nickname came from Rick's mother, but by 1987, the two were locked in an all-out war, determined to take each other out. Despite the help of Boone, at least 3 separate attempts on Big Ed's life by Maserati Rick and his crew ended in failure. On September 10, 1988, after slipping out of his house quietly while his bodyguard, Boone, was asleep, Maserati Rick crossed paths with Big Ed Hansard at one of Rick's car washes. The encounter quickly escalated into a deadly shootout. Rick was hit in the stomach, collapsing to the ground and ending up in the hospital, while Boone and others remained tight-lipped, refusing to cooperate with police. Boone eventually made his way to Rick's bedside, but it was Terrence Brown who showed up shortly after. Terrence, one of the remaining Brown brothers, was cold and ruthless, demanding Boone leave Rick to recover and instead come work for them. Seeing little choice, Boone agreed, ending his direct involvement with Rick's crew and fully aligning himself with the Browns' rising dominance on the east side. 2 days after Maserati Rick's death, a man walked into Rick's hospital room 307 at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital. The 29-year-old was officially pronounced dead at 6:01 p.m., having suffered multiple gunshots to the face. Boone would later insist that Terrence Brown had Rick killed, believing they no longer needed him due to his connection to a key supplier. To this day, no one has been convicted for Rick's murder. In the wake of his death, Rick's crew split, one faction falling under the leadership of Rick's older brother Clyde, while the Best Friends gang, led by Terrence, grew more entrenched in their ruthless dominance. Peace talks between the factions failed miserably, deepening the conflict. In October 1988, Boone was abruptly removed from the picture at a critical moment during the escalating gang war. After loaning his car to Terrence Brown, Boone was randomly stopped by police. Inside his vehicle, they found drugs that Terrence had carelessly left in the ashtray. Boone was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison. That same year, Reginald Brown was sentenced to life for a murder charge, leaving Terrence to fully take control of the Best Friends. On September 17, 1990, tragedy struck again when Maserati Rick's brother Clyde and his girlfriend Patricia Scott were gunned down after exiting Clyde's pickup truck with their 1-year-old son. The baby was unharmed, but the loss sent shockwaves through Detroit. For Boone, the murder of his little brother Andre while he was still in prison was the final straw. Rumors circulated that Terrence Brown had given Andre drugs to sell. But when Andre kept the money for himself, he thought his family connection to Boone would shield him from any repercussions. He was wrong. Terrence had him killed anyway. When Boone put all the pieces together, he was consumed by rage. The betrayal of his own family made him more determined than ever to seek justice. Driven by the desire for revenge, he agreed to become a DEA informant, cutting a deal in exchange for immunity. In a shocking turn, Boone confessed to all his crimes, including the murders, and helped expose 6 key figures responsible for his brother's death, people he had once planned to kill himself. His cooperation became a pivotal moment, shaking the already fractured world of the Best Friends gang and contributing to the unraveling of the empire they had built. Boone was out of prison in 1990, still bent on vengeance, fully intent on hunting down anyone involved in his brother's murder. But none of them ever knew that he knew. His chance at retribution never came. In July 1991, Terrence Brown, suspecting that Boone was cooperating with the federal government, which of course he was, offered him $20,000 to eliminate someone who had allegedly murdered a Best Friends member. What Boone didn't know was that the real plan was to set him up. Terrence had orchestrated it so that both Boone and the rival would be killed. Days later, Boone, along with Charles Chucky Doo Wilkes and other members of the gang, tracked down their target. As the rival climbed into a taxi, they opened fire, killing him instantly. But in the chaos, Boone, already injured and weakened from multiple gunshot wounds, managed to raise his own weapon. Seeing him still alive, his crew ran off, leaving him to fend for himself. Boone was eventually found and rushed to a local hospital, where he was treated for multiple gunshot wounds. But since Boone got caught up in that shooting, his parole got violated and he got hit with a 12 to 30 stretch. Even with Boone off the scene, the Best Friends run couldn't last much longer. In March 1992, a month after his appeal on that murder charge went through, Reginald Brown, who was even more reckless and wild by then, pulled up to the porch of an East Side crib and let loose. He killed 4 people in minutes. The reason? One of them had supposedly talked to the cops about the Browns. Reginald stayed on the run till March '93, when the feds, tracking his phone, found him and his brother Terrence at a Benz dealership all the way in Manhattan. Reginald got caught, but Terrence managed to escape, zipping off on a motorcycle and vanishing into a subway station. At 1 a.m. on August 9th, 1993, in the parking lot of the Ramada Renaissance Hotel in College Park, Georgia, police stumbled upon a stolen GMC Yukon with Michigan plates. In the trunk, they found a body wrapped in a bedsheet and garbage bag. The man was wearing nothing but a Shaquille O'Neal t-shirt and underwear. It was Terrence Brown, dead from a single gunshot to the head. Best Friends members Stacy the Machine Colbert and Charles Chucky Doo Wilkes are believed to have had Terrence murdered out of fear that he was planning to eliminate them next. That was the end of the Brown brothers' reign of terror in Detroit. After 17 long years, Boone finally walked out of prison in 2008, back to the same East Detroit streets he had left behind. He lives now under his real name, but nothing about him has changed. He ain't worried about the label snitch, because he knows how these streets work. If they got a problem with him, they'll say it to his face. But they don't, because they know what he's capable of. Reginald Brown, the last of the Brown brothers, still rots away in prison, buried in a cell while the city that once feared his name continues to decay. For Boone, there's no mystery to it. He's lived it, breathed it, and made it his reality. He reflects on his life with no illusions of glory. There's no retirement from this life, no real escape. It's a cycle of convicts, dead bodies, and broken souls. The streets only take, they never give. The hustlers, the killers, the players, none of them come out unscathed. Some get life in prison, some get the grave, and the rest, they're left crippled, both physically and mentally. Boone knows this better than most. He built his name in the hood, not through fear alone, but through cold, calculated violence. His legacy was written in the blood of those who crossed him. Whether it was the drive-bys, the hits, or the shakedowns, he lived by a code: family, respect, and money. But as far as glory, he's seen the truth. There ain't none. Just bodies piling up, stories untold, and dreams shattered. He made his mark, but at what cost? Boone might be free, but the streets haven't forgotten him. He walks the same streets, but the ghosts of his past follow close behind. The life he chose leaves no room for redemption. Just regret, bitterness, and the harsh reality that you either live by the sword or die by it.
The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.
Dear God, I wonder can you save me?